let's talk about the thing that we started there. Liz asked this question. Walt was asking this question. There were a few people asking questions about basically how do you get low end to translate on, like we talked about, iPhone, iMac, AirPods or earbuds, those sort of things. I know you talked about a frequency range of punch, the upper harmonics, but can you talk through that a little bit? Like you have a mix that has a lot of great subby low end. It's really even, everything's there, but how do you get that to feel impactful on speakers without bass?
Well, proper, like we talked about probably 2 or 3 episodes ago, proper gain staging is the key to all of that. So I just also on this stream with Ingmar doing a mix, I wanted the bass to have more growl, but I just told him to lower all the subgroups into his mix bus that was compressing too much. And all of a sudden the bass was more audible and there was more headroom for him to add the growl with the saturator plugin that I told him to try, right? So with how densely compressed it was already causing a negative effect to the bass by clamping it down and holding the upper harmonics down a bit. So that's the first stage, is proper gain staging. Honestly, like you can hear and feel 60 hertz on small devices if there's enough headroom for 60 hertz to actually develop. So if you're too loud, like we've talked, or too dense in upper mid-range frequencies, and we don't have enough energy in the low end, you actually won't be able to hear the bass. And then the more of the upper harmonics you push, the denser it gets, and then the more problems in other areas that we have, right? So really the easiest response is gain staging. So that's why we're doing these in episodes of we did low end after gain staging. If you don't understand gain staging, you can't really get low end to translate. Now there are tricks, and we can talk about tricks and saturation and upper harmonics. I would say reducing upper bass would actually help the upper harmonics above that in that 200 to 300 area and 400 area kind of shine without having to boost that, right? Because as you reduce it in EQ, you're raising the sides. That's phasing. So if you cut once 120, you'll see it. You know, we talked about the Fab Filter video. Just go reference that. You'll see it. There's going to be a bump around 100 and around 180 or however the Q width is. So I get more upper harmonics out of reduction moves, reducing slightly left or right in frequency range to what I want to be more audible. Let's
talk about that real quick. So because that seems counterintuitive, I think, probably to some people. What you're talking about is if you want something to speak, let's say you have an 808 note that has some crunch to it, has some saturation in it, and you want it to speak in that like 600 to 800 range, you might actually pull out something in the 400 range because it both leaves some space in the mix, gives you more
keyboards,
headroom. It gives you headroom for the keyboards, for if there's low vocals, any of that sort of stuff. Leaves some space when we talk about gain staging. Plus, because anytime you EQ, there's a little phase shift around it, either boosting or cutting. There's a phase shift, and that will help that frequency range speak a little bit more.
Yes. So when you EQ, you're not EQing only what you think you're EQing. You're affecting a lot around it on either side. So that's how I would get it to speak. Now, there's, again, like saturation, upper harmonics. Well, are you doing that in the sound design stage in production? Does the 808 already have that character? Why do I have to add more of that character? Maybe I have to take things out around it that leave that character exposed. Or maybe it doesn't have enough of it, but I get that they're going for a certain like DaBaby reference and they want that short, punchy 808 thing. Like I'm supposed to understand how to do that. So yeah, there are tricks to do that. But I don't necessarily think that there's a one size fits all argument to this, but upper harmonics,
100%.
But the easiest one size is upper harmonics translate on smaller devices. So you have to find that balance, but I love real low end and I'm going to do my best to not sacrifice that for other systems like cars and headphones that go a little deeper or someone's home audio system that they really love and that's how they're a fan of music from. So I want both and there are ways to get both, but gain staging, gain structure is the way to do that.
So let's. I want to stay on this topic, but say one thing or sort of a meta comment on this whole thing. Yeah. All of these things we're talking about are additional tools to figure out how to solve a problem if there is one. So that's a really important thing that you said, that the thing you're talking about, well, you might cut 400 to boost 800. That's a technique that if something is not working, this is one of many ways you can get it to speak better.
Yeah.
All these things we're talking about, you may not use for 5 consecutive mixes.
Yeah.
It may just be it's just a technique that can work on something. So this is like part of these conversations is to give people tools to use when they're asking the why of why am I using something? What do I want to accomplish? So staying with this top. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Do you want to?
I'll say I rarely reduce 150 hertz in a bass.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll say that one more time. Take that one back.
Take it back.
I don't always reduce that frequency range between 100 and 200 hertz in a bass, but sometimes I do.
Yeah.
When it's necessary. I don't always do it, but I do it a lot, but I also don't do it a lot.
Yep.
It's like there's no one size. But
absolutely.
That is a problematic area in live basses, to answer the question specifically. Live basses for real. And in 808s, depending on the octave and the key that it's in.
That's a really good shot. And one of the reasons that is, it's the octave up of a lot of bass parts. Because if bass parts are from a low E up, which is about 40 hertz, once you go double that, you're up almost near 100, and then 100 and 200 is all that, those overtones. We talk about overtones. We did a whole episode on overtones, harmonic saturation, all that kind of stuff. That understanding how these things work is really important. So the other thing that you go ahead.
Pause just on that, because on that episode we talked about this. But a quick tip would be split those notes out. And instead of doing any EQ to them, saturate just the higher ones. And maybe you'll control those negative frequencies that we don't want to have pop out, but kind of round them off a bit and control them enough that they just exist on their own without having to do any EQ. But you don't want to, you might not want to do the same saturation move to the 60 hertz and below and to that low end, because that's already free form and flowing and feeling like it is, right? So we might want to do saturation to different notes to split the higher octaves off the track if it's delivered to you in one track.